All right, we've got a nested shelf. The shelf has been linked, if you will, to the parameters within this family. That's what we did in the last video. That's why these are grayed out. And so we're ready to turn this into an array feature. So I'm going to go down to, oh, before we do that, what we ought to do before we try anything else is flex our model. So I'm going to pick that. We have this at 12 inches by 48 by 48. I'm going to pick the alternate size. And what I'm looking for when I apply it, did my shelf unit change in width? There's no height parameter changes yet, but this so far so good. That shelf unit changed in width and everything's working with our formula. Okay, so this next step, we really want to be in the front view, and we're going to create an array. When we create the array, it's going to group the objects within an array object. And that will mean that any changes we make will have to edit the group going forward. So I'm going to select the nested family, and I'm going to use the array tool and pick for now the number of arrays to be 2. And I do want to move to the second array, so that when I pick this shelf up and I put in a distance of 12 inches or 1 foot, that's set to a 2 array. I could change that to 3, and it should set the next shelf to another 12 inches. That's how this works. So we have an array, and when I select the shelf now, you can see that an edit group, no edit family appears anymore, and that's because I have to actually go in and edit the group to make any changes to that shelf going forward if I have to edit anything. But we're going to turn this array into a parameter. So I'm going to label that parameter by adding a new parameter. So notice what I did to get that to show up is I selected one of the shelves within the array family. Then I selected the actual array symbol, if you will, and then that brings up this modify array tool here with a label, and I can add the parameter. So this is going to be another type parameter. We may want it to be an instance in the future, but let's keep everything as a type parameter for now. And I want to call this shelf QTY for shelf quantity. That should work. Next, we want to link the number of shelves we have to the height of our structure, the height of it. Now I have a height of 5 feet. If I want these shelves to be at 1 foot increments, this height that I have on the inside is really 5 feet minus 4 inches at the bottom and minus 3/4 of an inch at the top. So what I really want to do is take this height, subtract that value, and then divide by an even amount to set the shelf quantity. Or we can approach it from another direction and say I'm going to have X number of shelves minus 1 depending on the height of the shelf unit. And then we can let the distance between the shelves be deemed by the distance that we have here between those dimensions. So it's going to be something we're going to play around with a little bit. So in order to get this started, though, I have to set some initial dimensions. So my first dimension is going to set the location of the first shelf. So I'm going to go from the reference line to the top of the first shelf. And I'm going to select that shelf there and change that value. Notice that's not coming up as an option for me to change that. So let's just make sure, whoops, let's make sure that we have the dimension set to that shelf unit. It does look like it's set to that. So I might have to fiddle with that afterwards. The next thing I'm going to do is set a dimension from shelf to shelf. All right, so let's see if I select the this parameter here, or I'm going to turn this into a parameter, and this will be shelf height, and then this will be distance between shelves. So select that one, call that shelf. I'm going to change that to first shelf height. And then we'll select this and turn that into a parameter called distance between shelves. Okay. Oh, I might have to remove that constraint. Let's see, that might not let us do that. Okay, so what was happening is the distance or setting parameter between these two distances does give you a warning, but you're allowed to ignore it. So I just set up a distance between shelf parameter and applied that to the distance between the two shelves. You're going to get this warning instead of hitting remove constraints. Just hit OK. And then we're going to create another parameter here that goes from the reference line to the top of the first shelf, and that should be constrained to first shelf height, and then we should be all set. So let's go to the 3D view, and what I want to see happen is this arrays and gives us another shelf unit as we grow in height or reduce in height. So I really need to link the number of shelves to the height of the shelf. So we're going to try something out. I'm going to go into the parameters, and across from shelf quantity, I'm going to set a formula that is shelf unit height divided by 1 foot. And you'll see what happens here in the preview is we get the more or less correct number of shelves, but we have one extra shelf that we really don't want because it's just one too many. So if we keep that part of the formula and enclose it in parentheses, and then just add one more, change the formula -1, and apply that. That gives us the correct number of shelves, and I think it won't matter what we set that height to. We'll always have one less shelf than the height we have, and so we won't have that problem of a floating shelf outside of our unit. So let's just test it. So under shelf unit height, I'm just going to change that to 6 feet. And what I'm looking for is that the shelf doesn't go beyond. So I'll hit OK here so I can zoom out a little bit further. And then I'm going to change it to 4 feet. And things seem to be working properly. Now I want to control the height of the first shelf and the distance between the shelves. I'm going to keep the distance between the shelves at 1 foot. The height of the first shelf may want to vary a little bit depending on how tall this unit gets. So I'm going to change the first shelf height to 1 foot and see what happens. That first bottom shelf is a little bit smaller, but if we try maybe 1 foot 2, that might make up the difference. And then let's set this shelf height back to 5 feet where we started so that this now matches again what we have set here. And it looks like we have our array parameter working properly. Just to make sure, let's make sure the width is still working. I'm going to switch this to the other shelf unit. And what we should see when we hit apply is the width of the shelves and the distance between shelves adjust. So one of the things that we didn't adjust because this is a separate type is you see that first shelf height is still set to that 1 foot 4 3/4 that we started with. I'm going to set that to 1 foot 2, and that should fix that. Everything else looks pretty good. Okay, so the next step now is to add the back of the shelf because we get the parameter working, and I want to add the crown, so we'll do that in the next video.